Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am CZ the Analyst. I just want to make this video, which is my first video on this YouTube channel. I shall be posting more videos as time goes on. Especially, I'm looking forward to the Supreme Court of Kenya to deliver a judgment on Monday, which I want to talk about as a way of predicting what is likely to be the outcome of that presidential election petition by Azimio's team Raila Odinga. So in this video, I just want to share a few comments about what I have heard during the proceedings of the Supreme Court. I've been following these elections right from day one. I followed them through as the results were being announced at Bomas, and I followed the petition hearing by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court. So here I want to talk about what I think is likely to be the judgment by the Supreme Court. Having followed all those proceedings, the way I see it, while the case seems complicated or complex, the judgment should be very simple, a very simple one, the way I see it. And the reason why it should be very simple is because the prayers of the 9 petitioners, having been reduced to 7, and the submissions by the respondents, they all had issues that were vague. They all had issues that were not clear. The content of the petitions and the respondents' responses by the first to the 9th respondents both contained a lot of chaff, which constituted many of the mainly unsubstantiated claims and counterclaims with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. A number of claims, without going into the specifics, I won't go into the specifics, made by the petitioners, attracted some interesting comments from the public. Some were saying this is more like, especially talking about Team Azimio, they were saying these guys, the lawyers, are behaving like movie producers. They were bringing a lot of fiction to the court. But I think on the side of the respondents to the petition, there were also a lot of unsubstantiated claims, some of them incriminating, like the allegations against the National Security Council, that they wanted to force the chairperson to alter the results in favor of Raila. So without going into detail, I realized that both parties, I've identified 3 of them. The first party being the Raila team. This is representing all the petitioners, and then we've got the Team Ruto and the Chepukati. That's another team on the other side. Then we've got the Team Cherera representing the side of the 4 commissioners. Although these 4 commissioners are actually part of the respondents, but I've put them separately as a separate team because in a way, while they are respondents, their submissions, they are helping the petitioners make their case in a way. So you realize that there are a lot of theories and stories, and then there's very little fact in presentations done by the different parties. I think the Chief Justice and the head team will really have to look into that. I believe they will look into that, that a lot of things that were presented were just theories and claims without any meaningful evidence to what was being presented that could be conclusive. So, at the end of the presentation, the Chief Justice noted that the presentations by different parties made their job easy. She made such a comment, and I agree. Below I present what I predict will be the line of thought of the judges and how they will deliver their judgment basing on what was presented by the different parties. So there are key statements that I noted which were said by the CJ in passing at different times. One of the statements, she was talking about how they as judges are able to separate law issues from non-law issues, because these lawyers at times they were going off the track and saying a lot of things that were very relevant. But I believe that statement is key, because I think basing on that, they will not entertain or even pay much attention to some of the issues that were being said, which really don't hold water because they lack any evidence. It's this person's word versus the other person's word. So, and then we have got the CJ also at the end. She talked about them working as a team and assigning each other duties where no one was more equal than the others. So, and that the court went through the petitions to get out that which was worth to hear. This was said at the beginning, that they had to sit down and really go through the petitions and decide what was worth hearing. So I believe that this is exactly how they will formulate their judgment. They will look at what are the real issues, out of everything that was presented. And the comment about them working as a team, I think indirectly it was an attack on the manner in which the EBC ran the elections, especially where Chebukati as the chairperson is said to have been a lone ranger in a way, running the show all by himself. So the bench will deal with issues of fact, what can or is known for sure versus what is alleged, because there were a lot of allegations which were not supported by any evidence. So I think they will deal more with what can be known and what is known. As the bench stated during the opening stages of the court, in response to the questions of who was representing the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commissions, where it said it cannot be drawn into the internal issues of IEBC as to who is and who is not representing the organization and all that. So in a way, I think what that means is even in delivering their judgment, I don't think that they will want to focus much on issues to do with these accusations and counter accusations between the chairperson, the three commissioners, and the vice chairperson and the other. Sorry, the chairperson and the two commissioners, and the vice chairperson and the other three commissioners. But I think what they would want to look at is how did IEBC run this election at the end of the day. Secondly, unsubstantiated claims and irrelevant issues will be ignored, as I've already said. The key issues will rest on the quantitative as well as the qualitative checks on whether IEBC ran the elections above board. With regard to the constitution and the electoral laws of the country, I think that's what it will focus on. On the quantitative side, I think the IEBC team representing Judgement and IEBC, the lawyers, they really tried to do a good job there in trying to defend the numbers, to say, look, elections are conclusive at the polling station, and look, even though the audit, during the audit that was ordered by the court, the numbers were found to tally regardless of the one or two minor errors as they claim that those were minor errors that were observed. And then on the qualitative, the team Raila Odinga, the lawyers representing Raila and other petitioners, I think did a good job to show that IEBC is found wanting as far as the qualitative expectations of how an election is to be run is concerned. Because the figures don't lie, as long as it is proved beyond reasonable doubt that nothing else from the qualitative side affect them, the team Judgement Ruto's case will suffer defeat at this point. This is my prediction, that as much as the figures don't lie, as much as the forensic investigation involving those 45 polling stations that were sampled, as much as they revealed that probably everything was in order, on the quantitative side, I think, yes, there is no clear way of knowing for sure that the results as indicated are genuine, are authentic, because of some issues with the qualitative issues to do with the election. So there was no concrete evidence presented by the petitioners to help the court conclude that the elections were rigged. But at the same time, there was no concrete evidence presented by the respondents, namely the IEBC, to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the elections weren't rigged. So with that in mind, I think the final results were not, there was no clear evidence that the final results were not tampered with. The respondents failed to give satisfactory answers to some critical questions, of which, if they given satisfactory answers, they would have passed the qualitative test, thus rendering the announced results valid and no need for nullification. But the fact that out of the 7 commissioners, 4 testify that they did not tally and verify the results. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant, because at the end of the day, it's all IEBC. And I think that will work in favor of Team Raila. And since the court has no time to order a recount and verify, or a recount or re-verification and tallying, the only option that would be available is to nullify everything and order a rerun. I think that would be the logical conclusion that we can get to. Both Team Judgement and Team Cherera, though disagreeing on the details of what happened at Bomas and why what happened, I think their submissions make it clear that what was announced cannot be trusted, since the court has not been able to establish the truth. No evidence on both sides besides accusations and counter-accusations. So I think these guys, they both failed to argue their case. So the noted irregularities which have been proved, though minor and human, according to Team Bukati and IEBC, on the strength of the preceding submissions that I've already said above, what happened at Bomas remains a mystery, making it difficult for the court to ignore and uphold the declaration of Ruto as the winner of the election. If the court decides to uphold Chebukati's declaration, it would put itself in a difficult position of siding with one faction of IEBC. Without reasonable ground to do so, it would mean that the court believes the 4 commissioners are wrong and Chebukati and the other 3 commissioners are right, and that without a basis, since the judges were not at Bomas and have no concrete evidence to establish what exactly transpired there. It would be suicidal, therefore, for the court to uphold a decision made by one side of the divided commission. The testimonies of the commissioners as representatives and custodians of the election have proved just but one thing, and that is the results as announced cannot be trusted. So I think the whole issue of the divisions between in the commission, where we have got the chairperson with these 2 commissioners, and we have got the vice chairperson and the other 3 commissioners, and this is all IEBC. So they are a commission that should be running these elections, and all these circus that took place at Bomas at that last day of just before the announcement of the presidential election result, it's just a testimony that something was seriously wrong with this presidential election issue, even though it cannot be pointed exactly what that was. So I think the court will be having a very difficult, it will be in a difficult position to, if it were to say what was announced is to be upheld as correct, because the commission being divided on its own shows that the commission itself does not trust its own results. So how should the court endorse such? From presented submissions, the question of what I'm talking about, the submissions presented by the lawyers of the different parties, the question of what the executive voter turnout was, and the noted discrepancies in figures here and there, and taking into consideration the small margin by which the declared president-elect won, it makes it impossible to know for sure that Mr. Ruto did surpass the 50% plus 1 vote. So I think that's where the problem is, because there is no way of knowing for sure that given all the circumstances that arose during the presentations at the court, it's clear that it was not possible to, it's not possible to know for sure how much, how many votes this guy got, Mr. Ruto. It becomes very difficult because of all the issues that make the whole election process a problem. Final ruling is therefore that because of the conduct of IEBC at the final stages of the presidential election, processing and the noted irregularities before, during, and after the election, it is impossible to know what is and what is not true, and the logical conclusion is to nullify the presidential election. This is what I think will be the final outcome of the court. I think that will be the most reasonable and logical ruling that the court will deliver. Having said that, let me conclude by saying I think it is maybe possible for the court to decide otherwise, to actually have an alternative judgment, and that judgment is as follows. It may be, although unlikely, that the court will take the route of putting the burden of proof on the petitioners as they aggrieved, arguing as presented above that there has been no evidence that the elections were rigged and therefore no reason to nullify the results as announced. This argument will be strengthened by the Clerk of Court's report on the audit done on the 45 polling stations as requested by Team Raila, which according to the team IEBC didn't find serious irregularities, and in which case there were no discrepancies on the results in possession of the political parties in the ballot box and in the IEBC portal. So, following this argument, I think if the judges are to decide along these lines or this line, the whole argument is where they will be saying the results as announced by Chepukati were based on originals from the polling stations where results are final. So, because this is something that the team IEBC really argued out to say, look, we have conducted this election and the results are there in the public for everybody to see, is reflected by the forms 34A is posted at the polling station level. But I think it's very unlikely that the court will go that route, but it's a possibility that they may say, okay, Team Azimio, Team Raila, and all the other petitioners that are on the side of opposing seeking nullification of these elections, you have failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there was rigging, so there's no need to nullify anything. So the court then decides to uphold the pronouncement by the chairperson Chepukati that Mr. Ruto is the president, 5th president of Kenya. But I personally doubt very much that will be the direction that the court will take, for reasons that I've said. I think it makes sense for the court to, because of all this opaqueness, the cloudiness that surrounds the presidential election, and looking at the small margin by which Ruto is said to have won, it means that even the small irregularities may be a pointer to something bigger. Let me close by making this comment that as somebody who has studied accounting, I remember when you do reconciliation statements, when you try to balance up the books and the books fail to balance, even by a small figure, the understanding is the seriousness of the error or the problem is not necessarily when the figure is big, the figure by which the books are not balancing is big, but even as the smallest error, sometimes you can have a very big variance, or the books fail to balance. If it's a trial balance, the trial balance fails to balance by a very big figure, and yet maybe that figure arises from just a single error. But at times things don't balance by a very small figure, but that reflecting numerous problems that you can then discover. So the very presence of an error, no matter how small, can be actually a reflection of a serious problem. So another last comment that I can make again is also related to accounting, is that it's said that when people want to mess around, like maybe they just want to steal money and cover it up, they can just try to mess up the books and make them untraceable. I think there's one lawyer who really touched on that some of these irregularities may have been deliberately created so that when you try to trace and make an audit of things, it becomes very difficult to make head or tail. So without really going into details, I think this will be the logical route that the court will take to say, look, this thing doesn't make sense. A lot of questions unanswered, and because of that, we will not, we can't then endorse this election and its results as something that reflects the will of the people of Kenya. So thank you very much. I come back after Monday when the court has made its decision to check on whether my analysis was right or wrong. And by then, especially if I'm right that the nullification would have happened, then I would want to talk about the presence of the bishops that were there in Bomas when the president-elect was announced. Because, as I've said, my interest is in how religion and politics actually interplay. So, for now, thank you.